Welcome everybody. As I said, this has been remarkably kind of popular with around 500 people registered for this event. And I'm hoping that a large number of you have been able to get in. I'm Adam Scorer. I'm the Chief Executive of National Energy Action. So welcome to the webinar, e-launch, or whatever we call these particular types of event. I'm not surprised that so many people have wanted to join it, to join the seminar. This is about realizing the potential benefits of smart prepay, especially in relationship to vulnerable householders. And I think that most people would recognize that making progress on smart is a necessary precondition for intervening faster for vulnerable households, for making sure that service delivery is better for vulnerable households, and we're able to test that the outcomes that we intend for vulnerable households are there. That's so much more the case for people on prepayment meter, and is so been made so explicit by the experience of the pandemic. And that's the motivation for doing the report, which is a product of colleagues at NEA and Energy Action Scotland, and supported by Smart Energy GB. So we're incredibly grateful for that. The process for the hour is that Matt Copeland from NEA will do a presentation, then we'll have a series of responses from colleagues who are on the screen, and I'll introduce those when we come to them. There's opportunity for Q&A, and I think the key thing is don't wait until you've heard everyone speak before you start putting questions in the questions and answer box. Otherwise, it's less likely you'll get an answer. So that would be that's the one plea. We have a hashtag, which I've forgotten what it's called. I think it's hashtag smart PPM, which is doing the rounds and will be used to kind of highlight especially some of the key points that Matt's going to make. If anybody's interested, we'll be making sure that the link to all of the report and the executive summary will follow on the seminar. Protocol is you can see us, we can't see you. So it's just the people who are responding and the presenters who are on screen. As I said, it'll last about an hour, and we really are interested not just in your questions and queries about the report and the issues in the report, but of course what we can do to drive the penetration of smart prepayment even greater, how we can understand the ways in which we can realize the benefits of smart prepay more urgently and more broadly for vulnerable households, and how we can use that to understand the experience of vulnerable householders. I always think that this is one of if there's two classic policy mistakes that tend to get made. One is that you assume that human beings will do exactly what policymakers expect you to do. And the other is that once you've identified potential benefits, you bank them. You assume that because they've been identified as potential, we've done them, and we don't kind of follow through to the implementation. I think this is a case where we might have counted too many policy chickens before enough of them have hatched in terms of the penetration of smart prepay. So that's a rambling introduction from me, and now I'm going to ask my colleague Matt to share his screen and take you through the findings of the report. So Matt, over to you.
Thanks, Adam. If I can work out how to share my screen, would be a good start. And if Adam, you could give me a nod that you can see a full slide, that's excellent. So hi everyone. So I'm Matt Copeland, Head of Policy and Public Affairs at National Energy Action. As Adam said, I'm going to take you through some of the findings of the report we've done, looking to maximise the benefits of smart prepayment. Before I get onto the findings of the report, I think it's really important to start with a bit of background on prepayment meters. So more than 7 million meters are in prepayment mode in some form across Great Britain, and that's more than 10% of the market. And it's slightly higher in Wales and Scotland than it is in England. We know that users of prepayment meters tend to be more likely to be fuel poor than those using credit meters, and tend to have at least one vulnerability that's sort of relevant to energy. We also know from research that other people have done that prepayment users with traditional meters, so legacy meters that require topping up using tokens or vouchers, have found it difficult to successfully engage in the energy market. But they've also faced additional difficulties in the pandemic when they've been told to stay at home, but they might need to leave their homes to top up their meter. Market actors have consistently over the past decade signaled that smart meters would help solve many of the issues that households with legacy prepayment meters face. And whilst the smart meter rollout is pretty much the same in terms of progress for prepayment as it is for credit, NEA believes that there is, and always believes that there's significant merit in going early and hard for smart metering on the prepayment side. Our research in this project looked to identify the benefits of smart meters for prepayment users, the barriers to the uptake of smart meters for prepayment users, and some interventions to remove those barriers as we look to really make the most of the smart meter rollout for prepayment households. So what research did we actually do? It was 4 parts to it. Firstly, some secondary research to identify some benefits, barriers, interventions that could be made to access those benefits. And what we did was look to quantify some of the benefits of smart meters to prepay customers as well, using BEIS's cost-benefit analysis that did in 2019. We also issued a call for evidence with interested stakeholders. Many of you, I'm sure, are on the call today to test those pre-identified elements with the secondary research, and also to suggest anything additional and to provide their own evidence to support our work. Once we had done that and collected a really good view of those benefits, barriers, and potential interventions, we spoke to a lot of experts from BEIS, Ofgem, energy suppliers, and beyond to really stress test what we'd found to make sure what we were saying was going to be the right thing. And fourthly, and I think the most important thing, we spoke to real households who use prepayment meters, both legacy and smart, to ensure that the report was reflective of their experience. So on to the findings, and first, the opportunity. So using the BEIS cost-benefit analysis, but also other evidence presented to us, we found a load of benefits for households, for suppliers, and for the wider market and the economy of upgrading legacy prepayment meters to smart meters. Through testing those benefits, we found these most significant benefits. And this includes more than 5 billion in benefits over the lifetime of the meters for households, more than 1 billion for suppliers, and significant benefits for the macroeconomy as well. Firstly, household benefits. And there's 2 I want to focus on. Firstly, the choice of energy tariff. The CMA, when they did the report on the energy market, about 5 years ago now, talked about the detriment that prepayment users face in the energy market, difficulties in switching and finding the best deals. Smart meters remove the technical physical barrier of the meter, having to change a meter to switch, and that facilitates huge savings for households. Secondly, better vending options. Currently, a prepayment user might have to go to a shop, spending money on travel, spending time, which costs as well, just to top up their meter and stay warm. A smart meter can remove all of that, meaning they can top up remotely in a way that better suits them. And that better vending option is something that really struck with the households we spoke to as well. For suppliers, over 1 billion in benefits, mostly coming from a reduction in the cost to serve households, their customers. And that comes from enhanced debt repayment processes and better management of costs for when households can't physically top up, amongst a lot of other things as well. But also, smart meters allow suppliers to much better engage with their prepayment customers too, building that relationship, enabling them to offer better products and services to them too. So big, broader benefits for suppliers as well. On the macro side, we think that smart meters in general are a prerequisite to meeting net zero. Prepayment meters are 10% of the market, Upgrading those legacy prepayment meters to smart is also a prerequisite. We also think that the way that in which this can reduce costs for households can make a big contribution to the fuel poverty target too. So here we've segmented those broader smart benefits to prepayment households, and we wanted to move on from that general recognition of the benefits of smart prepay to this more detailed look at what the benefits are, quantifying them, and where they lie. So hopefully this is a picture that will strike a chord with many of you, and also be as struck as we are with some of these figures. So why aren't we meeting the opportunity? It's because there's lots of challenges. And our findings are stark. There's clear evidence that vulnerable energy customers with older legacy prepayment meters were put at needless risk during the pandemic. Now, those customers have faced a really difficult time over the last 18 months, especially during the harshest lockdown periods, where they faced extra difficulty needing to leave the safety of their homes just to top up, keeping their lights on and their families warm. That danger and extra difficulty could have been prevented with a faster, stronger rollout of smart meters for those households. However, it's not all completely stark. We were really buoyed at the progress that has already been made in reducing barriers, and a key one being SMETS2 meters, where there were very few prepayment SMETS2 meters not so long ago because of the difficult connection with the DCC. That it isn't universally the case that's been overcome, but that largely has. And there are several barriers that we found have been in existence, but lots of work going on towards them. On screen, I've got the 9 main, more existing barriers that need to be addressed in some way to make the most of the rollout. These are the ones that came out as most significant when tested with our stakeholders, and I'll go through them in turn now. Firstly, the lack of tariffing at the smart prepayment market that reflect the lower cost to serve. So we know that suppliers will be saving quite a lot of money from smart prepay, but there isn't evidence that that's being passed through into tariffs. Secondly, poor awareness from households of the benefits of smart meters and in-home displays. So those huge benefits that we saw on that last slide, households aren't necessarily aware of, so they don't have the incentive to pick up the phone and ask for a smart meter. Thirdly, and universal, I'm sure everyone can appreciate this, is a hassle and disruption factor. Having to take a day off work, for example, can be a barrier. Then customer inertia, the propensity for each of us probably to do nothing. Now, this is really difficult to solve, but it just makes it even more imperative to look at these other barriers and do the most we can to solve those. Next, a lack of targets, specific targets for suppliers to replace prepayment meters for smart ones. In the smart meter rollout, there is one overall target really to replace meters and no focus on prepayment meters, which means that there's no prioritization in place so that those most in need receive a meter first. Then commercial decisions from suppliers to hold back offering prepayment meters, prepayment upgrades. And this, in many cases, was absolutely justified towards the beginning of the rollout. New technology, weren't 100% sure it was going to work all the time, probably shouldn't be going in the most vulnerable household's house. However, we're much more confident in technology now, and there is a case for really accelerating the rollout for the most vulnerable households. We all know people that have poor perceptions of energy suppliers, and it's probably most likely that the lowest income households that struggle with their energy bill will have the poor perceptions, and they're often using prepayment meters. That trust issue needs to be overcome, as does poor customer experiences of the rollout to date. Poor experiences propagate through communities much more likely than good experiences, and that is a huge barrier to overcome. And lastly, some physical barriers. On here, I've got semi-concealed meters that can be hard for installers to access, but also we've seen things like where the meter is very far from the in-home display and there's a connection issue, so you can't make the most of it. So lots of challenges there, but we have some ideas of how to overcome this. And we make recommendations in the report across 3 sections. Firstly, improving policy and regulation. Secondly, providing incentives for customers. And thirdly, improving customer awareness and accessibility of meters. I'll start with recommendation is to improve policy and regulation. As I've touched on, phase in their smart metering framework, which is due to begin in 2022, have already set the targets for suppliers, but these are an overall target that, that look at replacing meters on the whole without specifically looking at prepayment meters. We think that there is a case for having a specific target for the replacement of legacy prepayment meters, and this could be implemented either by tweaking that framework or working with Ofgem to make sure that there is adequate incentive through mechanisms to reward the replacement of those meters. So something specific for suppliers to target those households. Secondly, and something that was really positive that we found in the research, was the new and replacement obligation, which is an obligation on energy suppliers to, whenever they install a meter, whether it's a new meter or a replacement meter, for it to be a smart meter. So you shouldn't really be seeing new legacy prepayment meters being put in place. However, anecdotally, we have heard of instances where this is happening. So we believe that Ofgem should strengthen, monitor, and better enforce that obligation to ensure that smart meters are used whenever a legacy prepayment meter is replaced or moved. Another area we heard about in the report, in the research, was accessible in-home displays, which are in-home displays which are made much more accessible for households with certain vulnerabilities, so they can better access the benefits that we talked about before. However, suppliers don't proactively offer these accessible in-home displays to households requesting a smart meter necessarily, and households often aren't aware of them. So we think Ofgem should direct suppliers to offer them to households on the priority services register when they request a smart meter, and that our colleagues in Smart Energy GB should run further and more prominent campaigns aimed at boosting awareness of the accessible in-home display. On to incentives for customers. We spoke about earlier, firstly, that there's big benefits for suppliers in doing this, but also that doesn't necessarily obviously translate into reduced costs through tariffs. To make that cost saving much more obvious for households, we recommend that there's a rule that suppliers offer cash back to households when they receive a smart meter, prepayment households when they receive a smart meter, supplying that supplier benefit in a 50-50 split. That could be implemented as credit on the bill and would give a really strong incentive for a household to take up the offer of a smart meter. Lastly, we have a lot of recommendations on increasing awareness and accessibility of smart meters. And there's a package of measures we recommend, and we think there should be a concerted effort throughout the industry to increase awareness. The first thing we recommend is that industry should come together to create a targeted advice package for prepayment users. Now, we've got a lot of people on the call today responding to, as part of the panel, who could come together and make this happen. And we'd love to work with you to create a really standardized advice package for prepayment users on the benefits of smart prepay that can be used, for example, in warm home discount industry initiatives where that advice is now mandatory. Secondly, we think suppliers need to make use of their own data to better target that advice to the households who are most in need of smart meter upgrades. Third, those apartment blocks I spoke about where the meter is far away from the in-home display and there's connection issues. As those issues become overcome and more of those blocks become in play for smart metering, we think there's room for suppliers, BEIS and consumer groups getting together and targeting advice to those households where smart meters become available. We also think that energy efficiency schemes provide a really vital touch point in the energy industry and opportunities to talk about energy. So we think that upcoming streams such as Eco4 and the Home Upgrade Grant Scheme provide a really excellent touch point potentially to offer smart metering advice and integrating that into those schemes, much like a walk-in discount. And that can be piloted in a limited real-world trial to test the ability of suppliers to deliver advice in their delivery with Eco4. And lastly, building trust. So we think suppliers should commit to activities that can help build better trust with their legacy prepayment customers, including specific sessions to discuss the benefits of smart prepayment. All of those will take time, and something that's been in place for a while now that has given some level of protection to legacy prepay customers in the market has been the price cap, which the CMA first implemented after its review of the energy market. That price cap, as part of the default tariff price cap now, is due to end relatively soon next year. It is absolutely imperative that whilst the smart meter rollout is ongoing for legacy prepayment households, there is price protection for those households who are yet to receive an upgrade. But we also think that price caps can't last forever, and that smart meters are actually the fix to all of this. So we think that even after this next round of smart meter framework delivery ends in 2026, if there are legacy prepayment meters still in the market, then the smart meter rollout should continue until those meters are replaced. So those are our recommendations. What are we going to do next? So this is a continuing policy priority for NEA, and we're going to be disseminating these findings across the UK. We'll be working with governments, regulators and industry to make sure that the required changes take place. And we're hoping to work collaboratively with everyone who contributes to the report, but also those of you on the call who are new to this, to try and push these recommendations through. So please do get in touch if you want to work with us in achieving this and maximising the benefits of smart prepay. I am going to try and stop sharing my screen and then hand back over to Adam to get some comments from the others.
Thanks, Matt. I've got a stack of questions already about functionality, switching, quality of installation, acceptance resistance of smart, what you do with Wi-Fi, what the market offers are. So there's a huge bunch of questions coming in for you to look at now, Matt, in some detail. Figure out which ones you're going to respond to. So thank you very much. We're now going to run through a number of reasonably quick responses. We've got an eminent group of persons, I think it's how the G20 describes it, eminent group of persons with a different particular take on the challenges and the opportunities around smart. So I'll just tell you who it's going to be and then we'll come to an order. First of all, we're going to have Rob Cheesewright, the comms director from Smart Energy GB, who supported the programme. Got Oliver Sinclair, deputy director for the Smart Meter Implementation Programme at Bays, Colin Griffiths from Citizens Advice, Maxime Fruck from Grid Edge Policy Consultancy, Daisy Cross, who's had a smart programme at Energy UK, and then back to my colleague Peter Smith from NEA. So we're going to give some quick responses and hopefully keep a bit of time to address some of the questions, and we'll think about what we might do to incorporate some answers to the more regular kind of frequent questions when we kind of feedback. So Rob, if I can come over to you for a couple of minutes on your take on what you've heard.
Thank you, Adam. And I think the first thing I want to say is pay tribute to NEA and particularly Matt and Peter for the work that's gone into the research and the report. It's a really excellent piece of work, and obviously having that 4-stage methodology has added some kind of real texture and come at it from a lot of different ways. So I have real confidence in every element of it. Not that my personal confidence is the most important thing, but it's been really brilliant to see the work come to this stage. And I think the key thing is people, isn't it? Because the consumer detriment of having an analog smart meter is real and it is significant. And my personal story on this is more comical, but I used to have a prepayment meter. It was under my bed. I had to literally crawl on my hands and knees, bang my head on the kind of bottom of the bed to top it up. I had to go out. I lived in Bradford. I had to go out in winter in Bradford, which is miserable. It's the coldest place on earth, I think, and top up the meter. Now, for me, someone who's relatively able-bodied and male, that doesn't present that big a challenge. But I know that when my then girlfriend, now wife, was topping up the meter, I was really worried about her going out in the night to top up the meter. And if people with mobility issues, both the process of going to the shop to top up the meter and then accessing your meter wherever that is, and it can be 6 foot up in the air or it can be right down on the ground, these are just not acceptable conditions for people to have to buy energy in the 21st century. We have to move beyond analog metering. It is as straightforward as that. And we've got millions of people still on analog prepayment meters. So this isn't a small segment of the market. This isn't trivial. This isn't a sub-demographic. This is, genuinely a significant minority within the population, people that at scale we need to focus on. What really comes out from the report for me is that principle of prioritizing prepay, and I think that's right. I don't think it's okay that prepay just tracks alongside the general population, and that we should be happy if prepayment customers aren't behind credit customers. I think we should be really ambitious for prepayment customers, because fundamentally every prepay meter increases the quality of life of someone so much more than moving from a credit analog meter to a credit smart meter. I love all smart meters, of course I do, from Smart Energy GB, but prepay smart meters are a game changer and can really improve people's lives. And I think that is something that we've got to focus on. And obviously COVID has completely brought that home to life. There were people that were having to go to the shops during COVID, and they were putting their health at risk because we hadn't got a modern way of helping them buy their energy. Now, I think the nature of the smart meter rollout is it's a big telecommunications upgrade where over half of the homes in the UK were built before World War II. It's incredibly difficult. And I have sympathy with all of us where we weren't able to get smart prepayment meters into every home before COVID hit. It wasn't possible. But we are now at a stage where we've got a summer where we've got SMETS2 prepay at scale, where they are interoperable. And we know we are at risk of heading into a third wave. And I think as a society, and particularly people involved in the energy sector, I think we'll really kick ourselves if we don't really accelerate the smart prepay rollout over the next few months, because we will put people at risk of contracting COVID. And the consequences of that can be real. So I'm really delighted with the report and the recommendations. I think there's a lot there that I'm really keen that government explores. I'm also really pleased with the recommendations that look to Smart Energy GB's work. So we've been campaigning on smart prepay over the years. And the two things I'd say about that are we've tried our best in a pre-SMETS2 world to do it, but we've not yet done it at the scale that we can. So I think there is real opportunity for us to do more on SMETS, on smart prepay. Our work with vulnerable consumers, so we have a legal duty to support vulnerable consumers, has seen us partner with organisations up and down the country, and that's largely actually working with NEA, but also with local citizens advice groups. We have put a lot of focus into all sorts of local work that will absolutely communicate to vulnerable consumers, but I absolutely think we can do more. And the co-benefit for me is that every time we talk about prepayment, it makes people want smart meters. If you've never had a prepayment meter, you've only ever had credit, when you explain to someone the difference between smart and non-smart prepay, people go, right, I get it. That's why smart meters are brilliant. That does make a difference. So it has a real halo effect for all of us. And it's the one time I've been able to always convince almost anyone that smart meters are worth doing, no matter what their views, whether they're climate change deniers or whatever else kind of conspiracy theorists we see. When you talk about smart prepay, people get that. And so I think the power that smart prepay can have to reach everyone, particularly those who are vulnerable or in fuel poverty, is great for our campaign, but it can help us with everyone. So I'm really pleased, in particular then, with the accessible IHD recommendation, because I would love to talk more about the accessible IHD, and I think that's a real opportunity for us to explain exactly how this rollout has done something world leading, actually, in working with RNIB to create an in-home display that works for all sorts of areas, whether it's dexterity or sight and partial sightedness. So we've got some real opportunities.
I think I'm going to have to move on to get everyone else in, because I hate to stem the flow of passion from anybody, especially when it's about smart prepay. But I think I'll need to do that. So thank you very much. It's fantastic. Next, we'll go for a few quick words from Oliver Sinclair, responsibility for delivering the implementation program. But what's your take on what you've heard, Oliver?
Hi, Adam. Yeah, and hi, everyone. Yeah, I mean, I'll try and keep it short, sweet, and neat. I mean, we really welcome the highlights from the report, and wanted to take the opportunity as well to thank NEA for all that they're doing in this space, and they've been doing it for many years, with and really helping out low income and vulnerable consumers. Obviously, consumers are at the heart of the rollout, and we're really pleased that the report highlights the transformative benefits of smart meters. And as Rob says, we know that consumers with smart meters in prepayment mode are some of the strongest advocates for the program. So it's really important that we focus on them. I think what's pleasing is that over 99% of prepayment meters are served by consumers by suppliers that are actively offering smart prepayment. I think that's a good start. But I think it's right now that we have a real focus and a real push on this, because I think we need more focus on this area to continue to just convert more people to smart prepayment. And I think NEA's report provides some really thoughtful recommendations for ensuring that more consumers can benefit from this in the future. And I think we're going to look at the report's conclusions in more depth, and in conjunction with Ofgem and further discussion with NEA to sort of really have a look into what we can do to take forward. I think what's really helpful is the recommendations balance long-term regulatory recommendations, but also some short-term impactful actions that we that aren't going to get caught up in any kind of regulation that might be needed. And I think that's a really good balance to have in trying to take forward meaningful action in the short term. We're certainly going to continue to explore opportunities to highlight the benefits of smart metering through all the government initiatives that there are. We've begun doing this. The Warm Home Discount from autumn is going to have advice on smart metering as a matter of routine, and obviously we remain firmly committed to smart prepayment. I think the other thing to say is, Ofgem and ourselves have been really clear with energy suppliers. We expect them to be stepping up and ensuring that prepayment meters, their customers get prepayment smart meters in smart mode as soon as possible. So we're really looking forward to continuing to work with NEA and the wider industry to support this aim.
Thanks ever so much, Oliver. I'm going to put Matt on notice for a cluster of 3 questions around the same thing. One is around the SMETS 1, SMETS 2 distinction, and that is an obstacle. There's quite a bit around digital exclusion and how kind of folk who don't have access to broadband or the affordability of broadband, are they disadvantaged? Are they kind of cut out of all this? And the last is maybe a little questions about why we chose some of the incentive packages that we did. Are there other ways about getting market mechanisms to kind of bring people close to the benefits of smart? But thank you very much, Oliver. I'm now going to come to Colin, who leads on all this stuff at Citizens Advice, and I know they've been not just tracking but intervening on this a huge amount. So Colin, over to you.
Thank you. So I will start with the obligatory but very sincere praise for the NEA for doing this work. It's really useful. I am always keen on any and all work that puts more attention on smart prepay. I mean, I'm keen on work about smart generally, but smart prepay especially. So I'm very grateful this work's been done and been done so well. I'm going to pick up on a couple of specific bits, and I will keep it short, but just to single them out for praise. So one of the things that I was particularly happy to see was flagging this question about, since I started in smart metering, which is an embarrassingly long time ago, I've consistently told, well, we'll move from a world where people on prepay are paying a premium, often unfairly and often when they're the least able to pay, to a world where actually smart prepay will be the cheapest one because you're paying in advance and it's an easier way to run it. You don't have to worry about different meter types. And I was happy to see the report kind of specifically noting that we're not really seeing that yet. We were promised that prepay will become the cheapest and the easiest to run. And I'm very keen for that world to emerge. So I was just grateful the report kind of highlights that one as one of the issues. The other one, as ever, I'm very glad to see the accessible IHD getting a push. One of the first pieces of work I ever did on smart metering a long time ago, back when I sat one row of desks away from Adam in Consumer Futures, was looking at the accessibility of in-home displays. And that led through lots of other work and RNIB getting involved to the creation of the accessible IHD. It's really valuable. And I do think we need more awareness of it and more easy availability of it. So I was also very happy to see that getting in there. I guess my final point is to flag the less fun one, which is that smart prepay is also tangled up in the rich tapestry of issues that smart meters themselves face. So I've seen it looking in the chat quickly as well. There's still challenges around connectivity, especially for prepayment, because you need those top ups to go through consistently and reliably. On credit mode, 1 meter read a month will kind of do you. On prepay, it does need to be working very well. So there are challenges there. Also around landlords and getting engagement there, because we've seen a consistent kind of drop off among private rented sector getting smart meters installed. These are not insurmountable challenges. Some of them are technical, some of them are policy, but they do require some imagination and thought to get addressed. And I will stop there in the hope of keeping to time.
Brilliant, thank you, Colin. And I think one row of desks away is close enough for me to claim some reflected glory or credit for all that work, isn't it? And 100%. What I did to everybody who worked at Consumer Futures. Next over to Maxine. So much kind of authority and focus, not least the latest piece of work which particularly involved around sustainability first and CSE about the future of smart and the data opportunities. So Maxine, your reflections.
Great. And again, really welcome this report. I mean, I've been an advocate of smart prepay probably for even longer than Colin, having been involved right at the very beginning of the smart meter programme. Aware that prepay customers usually are a little bit more savvy about actually how much energy they're using, because they need to know how long the latest top-up is going to last them. But the real problems that we all know that people face around actually topping up and accessibility of tariffs and all sorts of other challenges. So smart prepay is, as the report really makes clear, brings real benefits to those customers, and we just need to now get on with it. Now we have the solution. Just a couple of points. I mean, awareness raising. I'm surprised Rob didn't mention it, but I know he's always looking for case studies and stories, and actually it's the stories here that bring it to life even more than the numbers. So hopefully you've got some good stories, but if you haven't, everybody on this call can help feed those through to Rob, because that brings it alive and will be persuasive to the audiences we're trying to reach. The next is thinking about post-2025, which Matt touched on. It seems a way off, but I think there is some serious thinking there, and there's a bit of looking back to the experience of what happened when we got rid of token meters, which again I was involved in way back. It will reach a point where it's no longer in supply's interest to support legacy meters if there's only one or two people in a particular area that are using it. And that provides another incentive and reason why we've got to get on. But we need a programme that will take time to develop to work out how that transition is going to happen. We have done it before when we've moved from different technologies of legacy to new ones. So let's learn those lessons. And then finally, just the points that Colin touched on at the end about things going wrong. I spent an awful lot of time at the beginning of the smart meter programme worrying about what happens if you lose connectivity and you're on a smart prepayment meter and can't top up. The additional complexities in change of supplier when switching, if you're on a prepayment meter, and what happens to the credit that you might have had on the meter. You can't use the card you used to have. Suppliers put you into credit mode as they switch you and then switch you back into prepay. So it's a lot more complicated to do change of supplier in prepay mode. I'm pleased the report didn't really pull out any issues, but there's a bit in the chat. And I think the thing to be as a recommendation is really to seize quickly on any issues that we see bubbling up and make sure they're fixed. Because again, as Rob knows, the odd bad story that gets out can be one of the most damaging things for people's confidence. So we need to tackle anything that we see brewing and be alive to those issues. But again, a great report, and really welcome the focus that you've shone on this issue.
Thanks, Maxine, and especially you and Colin for reminding us that these are not just meter points or even just customers. They're human beings, they're people, they're quite savvy, and they're looking for benefits and good experiences. They're not just people to whom a certain infrastructure program is done to, and they should be expected to be grateful for whatever it is they get. So on to Daisy from Energy UK. I think there's been a number of issues in the chat about some of the real opportunities are going to require responses from suppliers to realise the benefits that are inherent in smart prepay. So I don't want to put you on the spot about those questions in particular, Daisy, but just to see what your reflections are.
Thanks, and like everyone else, welcome the reports. So we know that there are huge benefits to this group of customers in particular, and it's quite timely as well, given that we're reaching the next phase of the rollout. So there's a key milestone of over half of customers being smart meter customers due this year. And there's also a new policy framework coming in soon as well. And I think so the report looks at COVID and vending options around and sort of links to the benefits of vending options and linking that to the pandemic, which I think is important. So suppliers were on the front line last year, and prepayment customers were a priority. So we were treating that as an essential visit to change customers to prepayment meters because of the benefits of topping up without having to leave the house. So report highlights lots of clear benefits to customers and suppliers, which is useful. So some of the more common ones like better tariff options and longer term reduced cost differentials. There's also some in there that I personally wasn't aware of. It's useful to see. So that, for instance, around the stigma that might be associated to smart prepayment and linking that to the top up. That was quite an interesting point. And I think on the tariff side of things, so as confidence and knowledge of the smart system builds across all suppliers and customers, I think new tariffs will be brought forward. And we also agree that legacy meters should be replaced with smart meters wherever possible and not other legacy meters. That has in the past been a course of action for some suppliers where a customer refuses a smart meter or where they've got a really remote premise. But in reality, the stock of these meters is very low, and we're really busy as an industry exploring what can be done in those situations where you don't have a legacy stock anymore. I think to your point around supply-related issues, obviously it's hard to answer all those specific questions, but I think they're very good questions and things that should be taken up by suppliers. It's in our interest as an industry that those barriers are resolved as quickly as possible and everything goes as smoothly as possible, because as the report says, and as others have said here, word of mouth is absolutely everything. And if you have a negative experience, that can outweigh all the many positive experiences that we've heard about for customers.
Smashing, Daisy, thank you ever so much. And now, kind of last but by no means least, my colleague Peter Smith from NEA.
Many thanks, Adam. First of all, I just want to reinforce a thank you that Matt made in his remarks to all of those that you've contributed to our research. Our research and the insight that's in it is based on over 130 responses to a call for evidence and a huge amount of detailed stakeholder input. So we wouldn't have been able to do that without your involvement. So a huge thank you to anybody that's contributed to that. We can also see some of the richness coming through from the Q&A, and feedback's going to be really helpful for us to embed that in terms of our follow-up around the report. I've only got a chance really to underline a couple of things which have been mentioned by other people, but I really do want to underline the consequences of inaction. You know, the full report captures the insight from household interviews, and you'll see in their own terms the issues and circumstances that the backloading of smart prepay has created for those households. And we underline that in our press release out today, saying up to 2 million households could have faced that predicament. So we do need to stress the need to crack on with this and not just front load the benefits or just highlight the benefits. There are real consequences if we don't act. And a bit like the fuel poverty targets, that if we backload those benefits, households have got less years to benefit from those to benefit from the ongoing benefits of that intervention or of that that approach. So we really do need to kind of crack on with things now that the evidence is so stark around the benefits and the consequences of inaction. I also want to underline that the need for a positive and proactive intervention from Ofgem and government. We obviously highlight in the recommendations some really good, I hope, practical suggestions around what we can do around advice and incentives. But given the split of the benefits isn't even, and they're mainly held by customer benefits, £5 billion worth of customer benefits compared to 1 billion of industry benefits, we do really need the government and regulators to come down in favour of consumers and act in a way which helps accelerate that progress. We know regulation's tough and that there's long lead-ins to needing to make reforms to sort of policy frameworks. But I would just stress the importance of that in light of the not so split benefit around this area. So we're looking to the regulator and government to do more around targets and to do more around improving the replacement obligation. as well as taking forward the consumer-facing advice and incentives recommendations that we stress in the report. So I'll leave it there, and I'm just delighted that the report's had so much interest, as seen by how many delegates we've got here today, and looking forward to taking forward the recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Peter. But I'm going to put a couple of questions primarily to Matt, but I'm kind of keen for the other respondents just to jump in and elbow the way in and contribute to it as well. But we've had lots of questions. I don't think you can see all the questions that have come through, but quite a few. So I think it might be two things kind of strike me. One is actually was Maxine's point that when issues come up, we've got to be able to get on top of them reasonably quickly, and that means that all the different moving parts across the industry and the regulatory regimes that are involved in that need to be able to act to those issues, even if they're not prominent in their own little bailiwick. So how do we as a system respond to the issues that come up and do so quickly? But I think it might be worth us trying to aggregate some of the themes and the types of questions that have come up in the Q&A and relay that back to as part of the sharing of documents that we're going to do from this seminar, because there's so many broad general ones and some really crunchy specific ones which will matter hugely for not only the success of the rollout but the realization of the benefits. But I have put Matt on alert to 3 general ones, which I'm sure you've had time to scan. But I'm going to add another one as well. But please, any other of the colleagues on the screen, please jump in as well. The first one was the general points around digital exclusion, either for cost or access or disconnectivity, and the challenges that presents to being able to drive the benefits of smart prepay. There's quite a few around the interoperability, interchangeability, kind of switching challenges around SMETS 1 and SMETS 2 and what sort of challenge that gives us. There's a few about how to realise what Colin rightly said is the not insignificant kind of benefit of smart prepay is that it's cheaper. It's cheaper to other types of tariff, and what are the ways of making sure that householders realise and feel those benefits. And there's a few dotted around the Q&A as well, which are really important for us as a frontline household supporting agency as well, is what challenge would smart prepay rolled out on scale provide to those existing means of supporting fuel poor households using prepayment meters as well. There's lots of us that are used to doing vouchers and top-up cards and a whole bunch of other stuff. And are we putting some of those in jeopardy, and what are the workarounds? So they're the 4 general areas. Matt, if you wouldn't mind, please just kind of dealing with all those. And if Matt's looking stressed, can others please jump in and make comments to move it on.
I'm almost certainly going to get to 3 and then forget the 4th. So please prompt me when I do. I'll start with digital exclusion. I think this is a really important one. And something that NEA has talked quite a lot about over the last year or so. In our conference last year, we had a session on digital exclusion, and we've continued our work on it since. I always see it as there being 2 things to address with digital exclusion. One is trying to make more people digitally included, so trying to increase accessibility of mobile phones and the internet and that sort of thing, but also increase confidence with using those sorts of things. Actually, because of COVID, I think there has been a real push for that from government. The bit that NEA usually is more interested in is more inclusive design of services and products to make sure that the services that are present in utilities, but here we're talking about the energy industry, are actually working for the households that use them. So we know at the moment that 20% of households are digitally excluded in some way. So to overcome that digital exclusion, initially, we need to ensure that products and services are designed to meet the needs of those households. In the context of smart meters and topping up, I think that we should be designing services for those households with smart prepay to enable them to remotely top up without having access to the internet. Now, I don't know the ins and outs of it. This isn't something that we covered in the report, but I don't think it's beyond the wit of man to design a service where that can be done over the phone. And it may well be that that's been the case already, and panelists can tell me if that's been the case. And if that isn't the case, then that's something that can be done and can be translated across to multiple suppliers as well. So I think that whilst digital exclusion presents a problem in lots of parts of the energy market, there are massive opportunities to get around it through inclusive service design. anyone else want to jump in on that point before I move on?
Just assume that if they want to jump in, they will jump in, and you will be able to go. Colin.
Sorry, just a really quick one on digital exclusion, which is flagged just because I saw a few, and I've answered a few typing away questions in there, specifically about being able to top up. Like, is this forcing everyone to only top up digitally and online? And it is worth flagging that my understanding, at least, is suppliers are obliged to allow cash top up still. Smart should be adding ways of topping up rather than replacing.
That's right. You've got apps on smartphones independent of stable internet use, and you have got the ability to call your supplier and get that top up added to your meter that way.
Fantastic. Matt, let's move on to Smet's ones. There's quite a few, but there certainly was at the beginning quite a few comments on the impact of.
Yeah, so I think that this was a barrier that we were expecting to come across, because it's something that the NEA have talked about for a number of years. But in the process of the evidence gathering and talking to expert stakeholders, we found out that significant progress has been made, not just in the connection of SMETS2 meters to DCC, but the conversion of SMETS2 meters essentially, or SMETS1 meters, sorry, essentially into a SMETS2 meter through over-the-air software upgrades. And I'm sure Rob and Oliver will be able to share that that is going at an absolute pace, and SMETS1 meters should be able to get that functionality very soon to be able to switch supplier.
Oliver, is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, so I think there's a whole program of work, almost not far off as big as the main program for installing, for getting first generation meters enrolled into the national system, and there I think over 4 million have been done so far, but it's rapidly picking up pace, and I think it's very much now in the suppliers' courts to bring their meters forward and put them in. I think there's no lack of capacity in the system. We want to get that done as fast as possible, and it's for benefit for all consumers, but obviously particularly we know there's quite a few. I think one particular supplier has mentioned in the comment, there's quite a few prepayment customers with a particular brand of meter that are eligible to be enrolled. So I think we have seen significant progress, and I think we'll see a lot more over the course of this year.
A cross analogy is to the double vaccination process. We're kind of making sure that people get the follow-up. Anybody else wants to kind of jump in, because it's not a shibboleth, it's a real issue, but the speed which it's being kind of dealt with probably needs to be communicated better. If no one else, then Matt, there was a couple of questions about the way in which we constructed some of the incentive benefits, but how you'd make sure that suppliers kind of feed through the cost to serve benefits to kind of householders. And we talked about cashback. Can you say a little bit more about kind of the options that might be available and why we kind of focused on that one?
Yeah, I think that that we looked at what was there at the moment through tariffs, and doing it through tariffs, which is sort of the default way of doing this, is, I think from what Colin just said and from our experience, it's not really working. It's not providing that, either it's not feeding through to those tariffs, or it's not providing the right incentive for people to access savings that mean something to them. So we looked at this sort of sharing of the benefit up front to make, firstly, ensure that that's bankable by the household immediately, and secondly, to provide a much sharper incentive. So a tariff, that those savings over a number of years, a tariff, you only feel it over a number of years. It takes 15 years to bank it. But through a sharing of that benefit up front, it's actually sharper in your pocket, on your meter more immediately. So we felt that was a much sharper incentive for the household, and a much fairer and more transparent way of sharing that benefit. Something that's really difficult with tariffs is that although there is a price cap, so you can see how different elements of it build up. Firstly, very few consumers look at the price cap build up to see how the elements are built into it, but also it is quite fuzzy around some of these costs as well. It's not very absolute around there's this much saving for prepayment customers, but sharing it in that way would be very transparent. You doing this saves a supplier this much, which is passed on to you, and a fairer way of doing it. So that was our thinking around it. And I think we were supported by some evidence that Smart Energy UB had around cashback as well. Sorry for throwing under the bus there, Rob. That doesn't exist, but I remember a conversation with your colleagues that I think that you've had a look at this before too.
And yeah, we did a piece of research looking at a kind of consumer uptake and what would increase consumer uptake, and that was across the whole market. So I wasn't specifically looking at prepay, but the research did find that those kind of cashback type offers could have an effect. It wasn't the thing that had the biggest effect across the whole market, but certainly with prepay, you can see, because there is a direct reduction in the cost to serve a prepay customer, there is, you can make that kind of line of argument much more clearly. So it's definitely, I mean, as with all the recommendations in the report, we'd really be keen to see it explored.
Smashing. I think that's probably all we've got time for in the questions. But as I said, I will. There will be recordings of the webinar and the presentation, and the copies of the report will be circulated. As I said, I think there's some value, not least for us, is to take some, identify some of the broad aggregators, areas of questionings that have come out, without losing sight of some of the specific kind of challenges, and make sure that we're focused on that for our next steps. And if we're able just to, a quick summary of the areas that came up, we'll be circulating that as well. There's a whole range of other questions that came up that we haven't really had time to get to. There was really good ones around geographies, straight from my colleague Fraser from Energy Action Scotland, so especially remote and rural, and the cost to serve, and they're getting to the end of the line. You're the last in the queue, and you don't get it quickly because of cost issues. What we're going to do about that, and around particular types of building where installation is either a challenge or not proceeding at pace. So there's many issues that have come up that we're really grateful for. As Matt said, the big follow-up is just to try and work through the challenge, work through the challenges with every interested party that we can find to make as much progress, because we need to realise the benefit of smart prepay for the, as Peter so rightly said, to deal with to avoid the consequences of the opportunity costs of not moving at pace and not moving through the most vulnerable first. There's a number of people mentioned the requirement in the Warm Home Discount Industry Initiative regs about smart advice being partly of that. I mean, we're very, very keen to talk to anybody about how we can make that work as efficiently and effectively as possible. So look, thank you ever so much for everybody who's taken the time to attend the webinar and listen to what Matt and the respondents have said. Very many thanks to the respondents who came with the promise of only a couple of minutes and didn't really get very much more than that. So that's incredibly grateful for that. This is a really important foundational piece of work, a foundational issue for us at National Energy Action. We do see many of the opportunities in making the retail market fairer, understanding the needs and the outcomes for vulnerable households more apparent, and also being able to ensure that in the path towards the very various pathways towards decarbonisation, heat and net zero, which require behaviour changes and they require innovative services and tariffs and prompts for householders, but they work for everybody. And for us, our mantra, as always, is it works for the most vulnerable and the worst cases first. So this is really important for us to put vulnerable fuel poor households at the front of every queue there is to get the benefits early and get the benefits sustained. Thank you ever so much for joining us. We'll circulate all the notes, and you've given us huge amount of food for thought. So thank you again, and hopefully we'll see you on a webinar soon. Bye-bye.